Okay guys, trivia time. What do these two men have in common with Monday Night Football? And no, neither Mac DeMarco nor Kevin Parker have ever geared up for the NFL. The answer is in the music. There's a little known genre from the 60s and 70s called library music. And despite the name, it's not the music you hear at your local library. Library music gets its name from the record labels, or libraries, who licensed background music for TV and film. Often printed on nondescript sleeves, it was never released to the general public. The idea of driving in your car blasting library music can seem like a joke, but it's actually highly sought after by collectors. The music can be undeniably catchy, innovative, emotional, or downright frightening. But most peculiar is library music's enduring influence on pop music today. How a few quirky British men in suits altered the evolution of hip-hop decades later. Or how countless internet subgenres have emerged that are based on nostalgia for the library era. And yes, I will even make the case that Mac DeMarco and Tame Impala would not be here if not for library music. Alright, let's do it. So first things first, although the two are sometimes grouped together, library music is different from soundtrack music. With the soundtrack, the music is typically composed specifically for the film, or TV show, or video game. The director will give detailed notes on how to tailor the music for each scene. Library music, on the other hand, is written for no one in particular. It's intended to be part of a library, which music supervisors can then browse through, selecting tracks that best fit their project. For those on a budget, it's way cheaper than commissioning a custom score. To make it easier for filmmakers to find what they need, library albums are typically named according to what moods they espouse or settings they evoke. That's how we end up with a whole album called Pollution, where each track is named after a different type of pollution. Personally, I really like Sea Pollution. Or take this absolute banger of a track called Consumer Goods. Library music has been around since the dawn of radio, and continues to the present day in the form of stock music websites. However, when you see the term library music on forums and music blogs, it usually refers to a specific period of time. Roughly the mid-60s to the late 80s, the golden era, when the stars aligned and library music was especially potent. The dawn of this age is largely attributed to London's KPM Records. Though the company had been publishing music for a long time, in the mid-60s, Robin Phillips took over as managing director. Up to this point, library music had been seen as more of a trivial or secondary concern. But Phillips saw no reason why it shouldn't rival, if not surpass, the quality of commercial releases. He hired composers from prominent rock bands like The Shadows and Manfred Mann, and started to release their music on 12-inch LPs, known as the KPM 1000 series. And some of these songs became pretty well known. Depending on what country you live in, you'll probably recognize some of these.
The Dallas Cowboys have been the almighty carnivore that has devoured nearly everything.
But the real fun in library records is not just identifying which tracks made it onto a major TV show. More often, it's about the tracks that were overlooked, but now, in retrospect, sound really ahead of their time, fusing elements of psych, prog, and soul that would make any chillwave artist bow in respect. library composers also had to follow certain rules that were not required of ordinary songwriters. For one, compositions had to be short, typically only 1 to 3 minutes in length, since filmmakers rarely needed music for a longer duration. Secondly, the mood had to be consistent the whole time. I mean, if your song is called Creeping Danger, it better evoke creeping danger for the full 2 minutes. Otherwise, the filmmaker will have a nasty surprise in the edit room. While this may sound artistically stifling, it's arguably what's given library music its enduring appeal. Ron Geesin is a composer who collaborated with Pink Floyd before joining KPM in 1972. As he described in an interview, creating library music was about building models of how you think, building your own brain patterns in the ideal. By nature, library music is meant to be received on a more subconscious level. You're not supposed to think about the fact that a band is performing. Rather, you're consenting to an act of hypnosis. The music manipulates your sense of space, making the action on the screen more visceral. For British composers, there was another rule that had an unintended consequence. The British Musicians Union was no fan of library music. They wanted to preserve the traditional model, where a custom score would be written for each film or TV show, thereby ensuring its members a steady stream of work. They banned union musicians from recording library records, and as a result, British composers had to travel abroad, to Germany or France, where they'd pack in as many recording sessions as possible. Naturally, when new technology emerged that made it possible to craft soundscapes without the need for international travel, the library composers were all over it. They were some of the earliest adopters of synthesizers. A natural fit for a media covering space travel, technology, nuclear war, and famine. One of the electronic composers for KPM was Delia Derbyshire, who previously recorded the Doctor Who theme song, as well as some far-out pop records. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this history of library music so far, remember to check out our follow-up podcast on Patreon. Editor Aldo and I dive into the topic even deeper, and we play longer samples of music that we can't do on YouTube because of the copyright restrictions. We release episodes regularly and actually cover a whole bunch of topics you won't see on YouTube. It's really the best way to support this channel, which is completely independent and takes a lot of time and money to do our level of research. I'm also going to do a little product review at the end, so stay tuned for that. Alright, back to the video. Now, so far we've talked a lot about KPM, but they only represent a fraction of library records, which were being recorded across Europe. There was Cosinus and Telemusic in France, Sonatone and Selected Sounds in Germany, Media Music from the USA, as well as tons of good Italian releases. Not to mention several competitors to KPM back in the UK, such as DeWolf, Bosworth, or Peer International. But here's the thing. Before you hop over to Discogs and purchase one of these, I have to give you a warning. Library music was still often made for very basic functional purposes. In other words, a lot of it was pretty plain. Many library collectors talk about the highs and lows of crate digging, going through dozens of lackluster tracks before finding the diamond in the rough. But fortunately, by today's day and age, a lot of that work has been done for us. There's tons of compilations out there that have found some of the most mind-blowing tracks. When I listen through these collections, I notice a few general categories. First of all, there's the upbeat funk. A lot of it. And over time, this morphed into disco. Then there's another category of more laid-back, loungy, prog-type songs. These tracks, to me, sound particularly modern, but more on that later. There's the electronic tracks, some of which verge on ambient or new age. While others step into krautrock territory. Finally, there's all the tracks that don't really fit a neat category, but sound really cool nonetheless. Anybody picking up on a particular trend here?
Tripping off the beat, kinda, dripping off the meat grinder, heat niner, pimping, stripping, soft, sweet minor.
So there's one more very important rule to library music. That is, once you publish it, the song can be used by absolutely anyone who pays the licensing fee. You might find out your precious baby of a track was used in a softcore porno, or an ad for a politician you hate, or an extremely influential hip-hop track. Fortunately, most library composers take it in stride.
It was done for function. It was done to actually sort of enhance pictures. If someone 50, 40 years later wants to sort of go, yo, motherfucker, on top of it, I'm happy, you know. I'm happy with that.
The use of library music in hip-hop goes back almost to the beginning. Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang features a sample from Alan Hawkshaw's studio band Love Deluxe.
Here comes that sound. Here comes that sound.
Starting in the 90s, however, hip-hop producers were looking for something new. As music writer Simon Reynolds explained, unlike peak oil or other natural resources, music can be sampled without being used up, but the cultural use value of a lick or beat does eventually depreciate with overexposure, which means that the crate digger vanguard is driven in search of ever rarer grooves. Thus, library records became one such option.
Let's say fuck you niggas, don't do you. Shit, niggas turned on Christ and they'll turn on you too. You the fucking general.
The fact that library tracks were created to convey a wide range of moods with top-notch quality session musicians made them especially lucrative.
Summon the powers of my auxiliary guardian to wet this track with oral tears. Your mind parties on these lashes of excellence become.
Even major artists were using library samples, like Nas and Beyonce. But I want to highlight one sample in particular. Thomas Clausen's Biorhythm No. 3 is a library track that's always kind of cracked me up. It just feels so sappy and dated, like it belongs on the soundtrack to a Windows 95 tutorial. When Jurassic 5 sampled it in World of Entertainment, they didn't hide any of these sappy elements.
Well, here's a little something for the people in the house. I'ma tell you what my crew is all about.
It's kind of like they wanted you to think of the on-hold music for the Home Shopping Network. The juxtaposition of poetic rapping over a kitschy corporate jingle is actually pretty profound. From my vantage point, this signaled a shift where artists began using library music in a more self-referential way, to evoke irony or nostalgia. And it wasn't just hip-hop. Boards of Canada recorded songs that were heavily inspired by the soundtracks of science documentaries they remembered as kids.
A new contraption to capture a dandelion in one piece has been put together by the crew.
Their name actually comes from the National Film Board of Canada, a prominent producer of educational films.
The North Pole, April 1974.
As Simon Reynolds and Mark Fisher famously noted, this became a significant trend in British independent music during the 2000s. Incidental TV and film samples from the 60s are used to create an atmosphere that's both unsettling and hypnotic. Reynolds and Fisher used the term hauntology to describe this trend of music that aimed to evoke the past, but in a disjointed, uncanny valley sort of way. They cite William Basinski, whose decaying orchestral loops, famously recorded as Basinski watched the aftermath of 9/11, evoked the feeling of a crumbling empire. They cite Burial, who explored the dark side of London's once euphoric rave scene. And then Ariel Pink, whose music could be described as a hodgepodge of 80s MTV, the good, bad, and the ugly. Hauntology preys on collective memory, injecting riffs and tones that sound vaguely familiar, but distinctly out of place in our current era. Library music isn't the only source material, but it's a pretty significant one, especially when you consider how ubiquitous these songs were on TV, advertisements, and film. The fact that library music was consumed subconsciously, building models of how you think, makes it an exceptionally powerful tool, lulling you into a decades-old state of mind. Library music was a key influence to Daniel Lopatin, who's released many influential albums under the name 1-0-Tricks Point Never.
There was this whole world of records made by these like dweebs basically with synthesizers like me that were just aspiring to the most epic, phantasmagorical shit.
The artwork for Lopatin's 2013 compilation album, Drawn and Quartered, was an homage to Bruton Music, a library label formed by Robin Phillips after KPM. And you can clearly hear the influence. Lopatin would also use film soundtracks, commercials, and even slowed down samples of yacht rock as his source material, repurposing stuff that, as he put it, is otherwise subjugated to be ignored or made irrelevant. It's like the way Native Americans would use every part of the buffalo. You don't want to waste all the stuff that's out there, because some of it can be pretty enlightening or interesting, or reveal certain things about who we are and what we do as human beings. Under this philosophy, Lopatin would release an album in 2011 called Echo Jams, which in turn would give rise to the genre known as Vaporwave. Library's influence was appearing everywhere. Since the 2010s, the use of library samples in contemporary music has skyrocketed, especially in hip-hop.
Change weekly, life in the big leagues. I can tell it's something about a fig trees. Wiggle German G's. Climbed up out the trenches as a shorty with intentions to switch my whip as much as Rick and Morty switch dimensions.
John Cameron's Liquid Sunshine has 69 documented samples on whosampled.com, nice. And all of them come from the 2010s or 2020s. Like a motherfucking postman, sending letters to the people, all the letters that I got, I'm like an old man, hold up when the old man. You could also hear library tracks being sampled in Vaporwave or Chillwave. But in these cases, I think it's less about the samples and more about the overall philosophy. Whether it's Neon Indian or Macintosh Plus, these artists were borrowing heavily from the Hauntology playbook, using old, loungy samples that made their music sound anachronistic. In a strange shakeup of music's evolutionary line, the way to sound hip and cutting edge was actually to make your music sound decades old. And that's where these figures come in, Mac DeMarco and Tame Impala. I point them out not because they were the biggest stars of the 2010s, but I think they represent the decade shift in indie rock, where it too became obsessed with the past. Now, with the caveat that both these guys have had long careers where they've experimented with different styles, their most popular songs often follow a similar playbook. First, you take a slow funk beat and add an extremely syncopated bass line. Then a guitar or synth that's doused in reverb. while we're at it, I think we can throw a few more artists on this list. Bands who really capitalized on this slow, loungy, psychedelic vibe.
Show me how you can.
And I don't know about you guys, but to me, it sounds a lot like library music. It's that same rhythm, same bass pattern, same primitive synth tones. I mean, am I crazy, or could Mac DeMarco's voice appear at any moment over Alto Glide?
While she's been away, leaving day to day.
Or does this song by Bernard Estardee not sound like the beginning of a Tame Impala track? Unfortunately, I can only play these super short samples for copyright reasons, so here's one more just to drive the point home. And look, I think I know what the counter arguments are. These library musicians recorded hundreds of tracks. If a handful of them sound like contemporary artists, well, a broken clock is right twice a day. Also, while DeMarco and Parker have never cited library music as inspiration, they have cited other 70s artists. So maybe it's just these guys they're borrowing from. But I don't know. It still sounds more like library music to me than anything else. And even if you've never listened to these records deliberately, I think it's a testament to their power. It's almost as if, in the process of making these sappy tunes for advertisers, they managed to do something pretty profound. They managed to drill deep in our collective subconscious, introducing beats and licks that are still used generations later to convey some of our deepest emotions. After all, if library music was about building models of how you think, is it not possible to say that it's also changed the way we think? Alright, I think I'll leave it at that. Get down in the comments section, let me know what you guys think. Also, as always, don't forget to check out our follow-up podcast on Patreon, where we'll be diving into library music even further. Alright guys, adios.
You have unlocked Bandsplaining's secret shopping network.
Studio headphones. It's what you use for recording, mixing, editing video, or just listening to music in its clearest, purest form. They don't have fancy features like Bluetooth or noise cancellation. They just do one thing, and do it well. I have tried a lot of headphones, and far and away, these Beyerdynamics are the best. I've had this exact pair for about 10 years now. They're built like a rock. They fit great, they're super comfortable, and they're naturally sound isolating. I'll be upfront that they are pretty big, potentially too big for smaller ears. Also, you're not going to get any heavy bass response, although really that's perfect for me, so I can get a nice, clean, flat sound. These are totally my own thoughts. Beyerdynamic is not paying me to say this, but if you buy it using the Amazon link in the description, we will earn a small commission. I have the 250 ohm version, which is more balanced, but you could go for 80 ohms if you want it to be louder. Really, this is just another way to support the channel. Even if you end up buying something else like laundry detergent, Bandsplaining still gets a small cut. I can spend another day researching music, not getting a day job, and our editor Aldo can get some bug spray he sorely needs in the Amazon jungle. Alright, until next time.